Hey Benjamin, how you doing, man? I got your email asking about some of the things that we did on the mixes for your songs, and so I thought it would be easier for me to just make a little video, kind of explaining some of the things that I did, um, and I hope it's helpful. I really like all the tracks that you guys recorded. I think it was so nicely done, and the guitar parts are just beautiful. The percussion, the singing, everything was really great. So it was a lot of fun to work on it. But maybe there's just a couple things that I can pass along that might be helpful. So I've got the tunes up here, and I'm just going to kind of go through some of the hot spots for me and try to explain maybe what I was thinking when I was working on this stuff. Good luck with that. So maybe the very first thing that I would talk about is just the idea of stereo image. Excuse me. I think in the mixes that I first received, I noticed right away that it was basically in mono. And the reason for that was because the stereo master fader was a mono track. So if you look at the session here, even if the individual tracks are panned, and I understand that I'm using a different DAW, you were using Pro Tools and I'm using Studio One, but that sort of doesn't matter. They all basically operate the same way. If you look at the panning, let's say like on the drum set here, the overheads are panned pretty far left and right. The toms are panned, the timbales. When you get into the percussion, things are in different parts of the mix. Same thing for the vocals. That's great, but if the master fader isn't stereo, then it doesn't really matter. So if you look at the right-hand side of my screen right here, this main output is my master fader, and it is a stereo output, 1 and 2. So it's going left and right out. And now I could make this mix mono in my DAW, at least in Studio One. If you click this little button right here, you can turn this into a mono mix, which is what I heard the first time I heard the mixes. So I'm going to flip it into stereo so you can hear the difference, right? Here it is in mono. And here comes stereo. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Right, so you can hear the whole thing really open up, right? So that was kind of the first thing that was just sort of fundamentally needed to be made stereo again, so that we could take advantage of our stereo field and put things in a different place. So maybe getting into the vocals here, and I'm looking at these tracks. Maybe I'll talk about tuning on the other track. So I'm going to save that for now. But maybe just kind of going through some of the plugins that I'm using. And I'm not like a plugin crazy kind of a person, but usually on just about every mix that I do, there's going to be at least 3 things. There's going to be EQ, compression, and reverb. And I think even with just those 3 things, you can do a lot. And I've got some different options here. So in this song, we see a lot of the Q series, EQ. So let's just open something up. Let's look at, I don't know, I guess we can look at a vocal here. So let me just go to my timeline here. I want to get to the verse. Right. So here's the EQ on this vocal. And it's interesting because I think the way this was recorded, there's a little bit of graininess in the microphone or the preamp that was used. But at the same time, I didn't want to make the track too dull because as a lead vocal, it still needs to sit on top of the mix. So I kind of accepted the tone of the signal path, but still added just a little bit of air. So I'm up here at about 10,000, 10K, adding a little bit of air is a pretty broad scope. And then I pulled out some mids here, maybe some of the room. And then this number 3 is set to 221. So this is going to be adding some warmth. So let me just solo the vocal, and I'll kind of take the EQ in and out so you can hear the difference. Here it is without the EQ.
Esto que estoy sintiendo es como soñar despierto. Después de tanto tiempo ya llega el momento.
So it sounds a little bit kind of thin and bodiless, and it could be a lot of reasons for that. Every reason for it could be the mic, the preamp, the singer, who knows. But I just try to take what I've given and just see if I can make it a little bit better. So the EQ that I put in there should add a little bit of body, and let's see how it sounds. Here it is without.
Esto que estoy
Here it is
sintiendo
with.
es como soñar despierto. Después de tanto tiempo ya llega el momento.
Yeah, so just a little bit more warmth. I've also put a high pass filter on, which I use a lot of, to get rid of any super low end rumble or wind noise that might come through. And it's just a great way to kind of clean tracks up, especially on a female vocal where there's not a lot of low frequency information anyway. You can usually put a high pass filter, which is this number 1 right here. So you can see that this one is set as a filter, not as a slope. And that just kind of gets rid of everything on the bottom that might muddy up the mix. Cool. Maybe a couple other quick little EQ things that are going on. Let's check out the congas here for a second.
Esto que estoy sintiendo.
Let me get to a part of the song where we have congas would be helpful. So let's see. They're going to come in at the chorus.
Hasta la eternidad.
Cool. And you might notice too that I've got them panned just a little bit to the left. So I didn't spread them out this way. I was really treating the congas as one instrument, and I put them over here. And maybe I've got bongo or something over here. So I try to, with instruments that have a similar tone quality, I try to give them each their own little space to live in. And it's true for percussion, but it's also true for harmonic instruments like guitar and piano, which theoretically are playing the same notes. They're playing the same chords. So I don't want to put them in exactly the same panning position because then they can mask each other. So maybe if a piano is really wide in a stereo image, the guitars might be in a little bit, or maybe the guitars are on one side and the piano's on the other. But try to give every frequency specific sound, try to give it its own place in the stereo image so that it's not competing with something else that's playing those same frequencies. If we look at the EQ on the congas, it's pretty drastic in the sense that I'm doing some pretty hard kind of notching, you might say. What I'm trying to do with number 3 here is find like the pitch of the conga and accentuate that pitch, the note. So let me just solo. Here it is without. I mean, it sounds good, but I'm just sort of cleaning up the mid range right before the note so that we get that tone very clearly, and then pull some of the mids out right in front of it. That's what number 5 is right here. And then the 6 on my EQ is just adding a little bit of that touch. And it's, if you listen to the conga by itself, it sounds perfectly fine, but in a mix with a bunch of other stuff going on, maybe to get it to kind of pop out, I'm adding a little bit of top into it. So here we are, with and without EQ. This is without. Here it comes. So yeah, it's a little bit bright and a little bit drier maybe now. But in the context of the mix, I felt like that's kind of what it needed to do in order to find its own space. Here are both congas together. And if you look at that one, it's an even more severe approach to the EQ. Yeah, a lot of mid-range on this one. And not a lot of body or tone. So you can see I'm trying to get some more tone in the sound and also get rid of some of that room and mid-range. So that's kind of, I mean, that's what I was trying to do with the EQ on those conga drums there. Let's talk a little bit about compression. So there is a compressor that I really, really like a lot, and you're going to see it a lot in this mix. It says Arvox, and it's a Renaissance compressor that's designed, I guess, for compressing vocals, Renaissance vocal compressor. But I think it sounds great on a whole bunch of different sources. I use it on everything. So let me see if there's another spot here where I can kind of feature that guy. Let's go to, well, I've got it on the congas. Is there anything else that's more interesting than that? I guess not. So check it out. On this, I think I used it on the other song even more, but let's go to this conga drum. Maybe go back to this one. Yeah. So it's a really simple plugin. It's got basically a threshold where it says comp. And when you lower that, it works more and more and more. It does more and more and more. And then the gain is a gain, makeup gain. So as you, well, kind of the opposite in this case. As you add more compression, it's going to get louder. So I kind of turn it up to the point where I'm really hearing the compression, and then I back it off. I don't want it to feel like it's clamping down on the signal, because sometimes it takes away some of the life. So I get it where I want it, back it off, and then you can adjust the amount of signal that's coming through with this gain knob right here. So I've got that on both conga drums, and it compression for me just has the effect. It depends on what it's for, but in a case like this, I'm trying to get some more body to the sound. And basically with a compressor, you're taking the dynamic range and you're compressing it, you're making it smaller, but then you can turn that whole thing up. And some of the stuff that's down here that represents the body of the sound comes along for the ride. Maybe another reason for having a compressor is to help to tame some of the top end of the dynamic range, a transient or something that's a little bit too loud. And it can help kind of tame some of those too. I use that on vocals sometimes, even when I'm tracking. Another compressor that I really like a lot, since we're talking about compression, is something I can show you on the vocal. So this is a recreation. It's a virtual, plug-in version of something called an LA2A, which was originally made by a company called Teletronics and then by UA. And now there's some other brands that are making imitations or copies of this kind of a circuit, most notably a company called Warm Audio that makes a hardware version that's really good. I actually use it at our other studio all the time. And this is an optical compressor. And what I like about it is that it is a very transparent compressor. You don't hear it working, and you can actually hit it pretty hard without it sounding like it's contracting the sound. So on a vocal, especially something that's got a lot of energy in it, that you don't want to kill that energy, but you want to just sort of tame things a little bit. This sounds really good. Here it is without.
Te entrego mis sonrisas, besos,
hear the difference?
caricias cuando así lo quieras.
Here it is without again.
Yo te entrego mi vida y lo mejor de mi alma.
So you hear like just a little bit of weight coming back in, a little bit of body into the sound, and also kind of taming some of those more harsh, higher notes that get sung. So this one's really great. I've got actually also on the lead vocal another one, which is an SSL bus compressor, something that was kind of engineered to be in the center console of an SSL mixing console. And this is just like a second level. So sometimes on a vocal, I'll do, instead of one compressor that's working really hard, I'll do two compressors. One that kind of tames the top end and gives it some body, and then a second one just to add a little bit more, more. So let me put this one in and out so you can hear it.
Hasta la eternidad.
Here's without.
Te entrego mis sonrisas, besos, caricias cuando así lo quieras.
So I don't know if you can feel that kind of getting pushed forward a little bit. Hopefully the idea, especially with the lead vocal, is you're trying to get it in front of this big mix with all this stuff going on, but without just turning it up. Because if you just turn it up, it's going to kind of pop in and out, and maybe it's going to sound too loud in relation to the band. So you're just trying to bring it forward without the dynamics kind of getting out of control. So that's something that happens sometimes. You'll end up putting more than one compressor on a track just to get it to sit well in the mix. And so those are the two that I'm using on the lead vocal on this one. And it also kind of, like I said, just kind of smooths out some of that kind of raspiness or kind of grittiness to the way it was recorded. Cool. Maybe a brief look at just some of the effects that I've got going on. So you'll notice that the sends here, some of them say room delay, right? And then some of them say room verb. So I have at least two reverbs over here. And the room delay is I love this reverb. It's $50. It's called Valhalla Room. And it is, it's just not transparent. It's sort of light and airy and organic and not grainy and digital. And you can do a lot with this room plugin. You can make it big and small and whatever you like. It's really amazing. For $50, I would definitely recommend checking it out. So I've got this room here, and then I've got another one over here. So it's not uncommon to have more than one reverb in a mix. And sometimes it's so that you can have kind of just like a room sound, and then also have something that's a little bit longer. And this being a more up-tempo track, I didn't want to go too crazy on the reverbs. So hopefully I didn't, but there's one spot where I went crazy with reverb, and I actually have a third, which is this long reverb right here. And if I open this up, this one is a kind of a bigger sounding reverb for the track. And you'll also notice that I've got it EQ'd. So what I did was I actually put an EQ after the reverb in the signal path, and I've got a really severe high pass filter right here. So it's basically getting rid of all the mids and lows and just getting that top end. And the reason that it's that way is because this long reverb is actually automated to only come on during those little pre-choruses when the snare drum plays on the low snare. So let me go there. So if you look at the track, I've got these markers here. There's verse 1, pre-chorus, and chorus. So the pre-chorus, I'm actually using two snare drums on this track. I had one that I was playing most of the time, kind of a high, tight snare. And then I had another snare drum over to my left, which was a big, deep snare drum that was kind of tuned down. And so it was just a totally different sound. And then I put this really big, washy reverb on it. So let's check it out. Here's a little bit of the verse. Different snare drum. And then back to the regular snare right here. So hopefully you can hear the difference between those two. And if you look at the reverb for that, you're going to see that the fader's down, and then when that section comes in, it comes up. See it? Yeah, so that's just kind of an automation. If you go to the sort of arranger window and look at the very bottom here, you will see automation for that long reverb. And so the way that it works, let me change the color of this track to make it easier to see. That's better. So you can see that it's out here and then it comes in, right? So here comes the automation. There it is. So it's letting that snare drum come through only on those sections of the song. So that's how I kind of engineered that pre-chorus to sound different on the snare drum. So that's a couple things on that tune. Let me pull up the other tune real quick. Yeah, what about this one? Okay, so here we could talk a little bit about how I treated the vocal. So if you look at my plugin list for the lead vocal, it starts with Melodyne. So Melodyne is a pitch correction software. And even though I might have like gathered most of his vocal, I didn't necessarily fix everything. So I listen, and if I find something that I feel like needs to get moved, then I'll move it. Sometimes it sounds unnatural if you literally fix everything. So I try to pick my spots, but often like the last note of a phrase, if it's a long tone, let me see if I can find one. Here we go. This is a great example. So no doubt I pitch corrected that note. Let me see if it's possible for me to reset individual edits, reset pitch. Maybe not. Reset pitch center. Maybe not. But something like that where it's a long tone and there's probably like one chord that everybody's playing and you need that note to be like right in tune with the chord. That would probably be a spot where I would go ahead and tune it up. So that's what Melodyne looks like. And it's actually incorporated into PreSonus Studio One, but you can buy it if you have Pro Tools. You can buy Melodyne and use it as a third-party plugin. Just remember that if you're tuning a track, you need that to be the first plugin on the track because you want everything else that you do to come after the tuning. So Melodyne is first. Next, I've got some EQ. We see a high pass filter on the bottom. We see a little bit of top end. And then number 5 here, I'm just pulling out a little bit of mids. After that, I've got that same CLA2A, which is that compressor. And then what else did I do? The tap. So on this tune, I used delays both on the vocal and on the guitar, which was played so beautifully. And I'm using the delays to kind of add length without reverb. So it's a long, this tune is a ballad and you can put a big luscious reverb and that's cool. But sometimes if you just have things swimming in reverb, it takes away some of the energy and the intimacy, the immediacy of a vocal or a guitar solo. So what I will do in addition maybe to reverb is add a delay. And so what you see here is it's called the Super Tap 2. It's a Waves plugin. And it allows me to add a delay where the delay part, the feedback of the delay, can be pushed into like a 3-dimensional or maybe a 2-dimensional left and right space. So we have the original center track here, and then we have one of those delays down there. The right one is over here and it's a little closer. The left one is farther back and more towards the center. So here it is without.
De repente me encuentro un mundo nuevo y hermoso porque estabas tú.
And here it is with.
De repente me encuentro un mundo nuevo y hermoso porque estabas tú.
And you really hear it when it's soloed, but in context of the song, it just adds this kind of like length to the vocal. It helps kind of push it through some of the long tones and some of the transitions to the next part of the song. And I like that you can set it up so that it's rhythmic. So if you look at the plugin, I've actually got his voice programmed to delay at the quarter note level. So you can set the tempo of the song, and then you can have the delay be in time with the tempo of the song. So on his voice, it's a quarter note. And then if you go to the guitar, and I think I've got the guitar solo. Yeah, here it is right here. If you go to the guitar track, let's see, where's the guitar? Sorry, let me just find the guitar solo. Where are you? You are down here. Okay. So right. So you get that eighth note delay with a longer feedback, and it gives it this beautiful sustain and delay, but it's rhythmic. It's in time with the song. So if I take it out, it sounds great. But I just felt like it needed more, like sort of energy going forward. So I added the delay just to give it that. Right? So it takes that one note, and it allows it to have life, beyond when it stops, which is really cool. Also in the guitar, I've got the Renaissance Vox compressor. I've got a Q6, which is doing a pretty severe high pass, really trying to get that thing to cut through. And once again, the SSL bus compressor. So I'm just trying to give it some body, trying to sort of compact it a little bit so that it's forward. And as opposed to just turning it up in the mix, I can kind of bring it up through some compression and give it that center spotlight that it needs to really sound like a guitar solo. So that's what I did, and it's got both the short room and the long verb on there as well. So I kind of gave it, I threw the kitchen sink at the guitar solo, but I wanted people to hear it. So that's kind of what I did on that tune. Let me just look back and see if there's anything else about this one.
Así vestida de novia.
Yeah. Right. So here, with these guitars, notice how the acoustic's on the right and the electric is on the left. So I'm separating them in the mix. And that's pretty much kind of in the center, a little bit to the left. So, but when the electric comes in, it's kind of opposite the acoustic. So the acoustic is kind of on the right, and the two electrics are on the left. It's almost like the electric guitar player, hit the pedal and went into overdrive. So it sounds like it's coming from the same spot. Yeah, so nice. What else on this one?
Ser tu otro papá.
Get that extra loop on the delay. Yeah, really dig that. And then the outro on this tune, kind of like the other tune, has that fat snare.
Yo ser tu otro papá. Y ahora ven ser feliz.
So that's snare number 2. If I can solo just the drum, or just the snare drum, this person here. There it is. And the other thing I did, it's subtle, but if you look at the panning of the snare drums, the regular snare drum, if you will, for lack of a better term, the regular one, is right dead center. It's right in the middle of the track as we would normally expect the snare drum to be. Kick and snare usually dead in the middle. But the snare drum that I played, at the drummer perspective, it was on my left. But if you're looking at the drums from the audience perspective, it's on the right. So the snare 2, which was left for me, is right to the audience perspective. So that's why it's panned just a little bit to the right. And you can see that too with things like the hi-hat, which is really far on the right-hand side because the audience looking at the drum set, that's where the hi-hat lives. So it's important when you get drum files, kind of listen to the overheads and see which way were they recorded. Was it audience perspective or was it drummer perspective? So I don't know. I don't know if that's helpful or not. Maybe if there's something specific you want to know, you can let me know and I could make another short video. But those are just a few of the things that that I did on this track. Maybe the last thing, and then I'll close out, is just looking at my master fader. I basically mastered this myself. I mean, we didn't send it to a separate mastering engineer. So we have this Brainworks, which is made by Plugin Alliance. It's a great sort of mastering EQ. So you can kind of see, again, some more high pass filtering and a little bit of shimmer and shine, a little bit of extra width right here, the stereo width. Below that, we have, once again, the Arvox compressor. I'm using it on the master bus. And then finally, the Ultra, what's it called? Ultra Maximizer, which is a limiter. And this basically adds volume. So it's kind of like just making the whole thing louder. Once again, kind of like with compression, I'll get it where I want it. But if I start to hear it sort of clamping down, then I back off. Because and my opinion is that if people want it to be louder, they should just turn it up. But just to give you an idea of how drastic this is, I'm going to turn it off. Here it comes. So yeah, it adds quite a bit of level. The main thing is make sure that when you're mixing that the individual tracks are not overdriving the master fader. If the master fader ever clips, that means that the individual tracks need to come down. Your gain is off. Sometimes I'll see where people have clipping on the master fader and then they just turn the master fader down, which doesn't actually help because what you're doing now is you're taking an already clipped signal and just turning it down on the output side. But if your master fader is clipping, it means that everything that's coming up to that point is too much. So you have to bring down all the individual tracks. So I like to give myself a good 4 to 6 dB of headroom on the master fader. And then if I need to bring it back with a limiter at the very end, then I'll do that. But you definitely don't want to clip the master fader. So, all right, I hope that's helpful. And yeah, let me know if you have any more questions. And thank you very much for letting me work on the song. It was really, really fun. All right, cheers.